Sometimes it's not all about the numbers. Today I'm going to go over 3 case studies. All the numbers work, but 2 times I said no, and 1 time I said yes. Today we're going to break it down. Thanks for joining me today on Growing the Money, where we talk about growing our money. If you're a real estate investor or you're trying to grow your money at 20, 30, 40, even 50% sometimes on these notes, this is the podcast for you. All right, everybody, let's just get right to it. All right, I don't have my coffee this morning, only a little glass of water. All right, I'm going to go over today sometimes where I just decided not to do the deals. And even though the numbers worked on paper, I'm going to explain myself a little bit. And hopefully that'll give you some insight onto what deals to say yes to and what deals to say no to. And I know I like to talk about it always being a mathematical equation, but I don't know. I guess sometimes it's not. All right, deal number 1. I didn't get an offer. I had someone reach out through our website with the possibility of funding a deal. Purchase price of the deal was $75,000. The renovations on the property was about $100,000, and the ARV of the property was a little bit south of 300. So certainly the numbers worked, right? If our numbers are 70% of ARV, which would be 210. If it was 300,000, 70% would be 210, and then if it's $100,000 renovation, they could have gotten that renovation for as high as $110,000 to make the numbers work. They had the house under contract for $75,000, and they were willing to put down an additional 20, and I still didn't want to do the deal. And I'll tell you why. When you make a loan, the number one thing that you have to think about is that you might end up with the asset. And if you don't want the project, if you don't think that that's something that you could complete, then that is not a loan that you should make. And a $100,000 loan on a property that only costs $75,000 is a very extensive construction project. And if let's say that something goes wrong on that construction project, and maybe the flipper, the borrower didn't have all the skill set that you thought they had, and they made a bunch of mistakes, you could end up with a really big problem. So I am cautious about properties that the renovation budget is greater than the purchase price. And when you start getting up around the around the $100,000 renovation budgets for a property that's only about 12 or 1,300 square feet, you are talking a massive, complicated, many things can go wrong type of renovation. And man, I have not done a $100,000 renovation in at least 5 years. And I hope in my lifetime I never have to do another $100,000 renovation. So I looked at the property and said, you know what? If something goes wrong here, I don't want to have to take this property back. I don't want anything to do with the property. And therefore, I just didn't lend on it. And hopefully that borrower went out, found someone else who would be willing to do that job. But don't be afraid to say no if you don't want to take that property back. It could be a real problem for you down the road. All right, number 2 that I said no to. Occasionally I get people reach out to me for multifamilies. They want a slightly bigger project. So they want that project to be maybe worth 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, something like that. And I don't mind doing those projects. It's good to go out and move a lot of money at one time. Security really matters on the issue. But here's what I didn't like about this deal. There was already a first and a second in position. Now, anytime that there is a first and you are being offered in second, then we already know that that is a very dangerous spot, and only a true expert, only someone who really understands what's going on should ever really lend in second position, let alone third position. Third position makes it really awkward. I would almost never lend in third position. So even though the third position, what was currently the second position on the note, was seller finance. So someone had gotten some of the seller finance to carry back some of the note. And they had gotten a money loan for first, and they had seller finance in second. But they ran out of money in the project. Dealing with Richmond City is wildly difficult. Anybody who's been trying to deal with them, particularly lately, has been very difficult. And they've just run into problems. Well, they approached the seller of the property, and the seller of the property offered to go into third position and allow me to come back in at second position. And so on the surface, that starts to look attractive. So I've got a first position, but I'm an experienced lender, so I wouldn't necessarily rule it out just for that. But then having someone behind me in third position really gives me some comfort in that I am not going to get squashed by second, and that somebody believes in the project enough to put a whole bunch of money in the third position. And these people were looking for about $500,000 or $600,000. They had a first position of about $500,000 or $600,000. I'll call it $600,000, and they wanted to borrow an additional $200,000 from me to finish the project. And they were going to move third position, which is over $300,000. They're going to move that to third position. And so what I didn't like about this deal is by the time all those numbers add up together, they added up to, let's see, 600, 800, 800 plus another three is 1.15. And they really thought that the value of the home or the project was between 1.2 and 1.3. And what I didn't like about this was that all the equity was gone from the deal by the time third position was there. So even though my money was fairly secured in second position, because I'm into a project that's 600,000 in first, I give another 200,000, I'm in for 800,000. The project is worth 1.2 million. But the problem is that third position has $300,000 there. And so eventually along the road, the person running the project is going to recognize that they don't have any equity in the deal anymore. And in a situation where the borrower has no equity in the deal, makes it extremely easy for that borrower to walk away. They really don't gain anything from finishing the project. And so even though the numbers worked, even in second position, what I didn't like about the deal was that third position basically took out all the equity of the borrower, and therefore I didn't feel like the borrower was very incentivized to get the project done. And so therefore I just declined that deal. And so even though the numbers worked, just didn't feel like it was for me. I didn't like the risk of the borrower not getting a profit, because the borrower getting the profit is what keeps that borrower in the deal. All right, number 3. I love to make these types of loans. I know some people think poorly upon investors for this, and I don't understand it at all, to be honest. If I had an investor who wanted some money to do a project and they had a ton of equity in some of their rentals and they wanted to borrow a couple $100,000 on one of their houses that had all that equity, and I was able to take out first position, I was able to line up in first. Some lenders I find are a little bit biased towards real estate investors who want to borrow money against their equity in their properties. And honestly, I don't get that. I'm a real big proponent as a real estate investors to have a bunch of free and clears laying around, have a bunch of properties with really low equity amounts, so that if you ever need money for something, if you ever need money for a project, you can just tap into your own equity, throw a note and deed of trust on there real quick, and then get the money to do what you're going to do. And some people don't like to do those deals as lenders. They feel like maybe the investor has made some poor decisions. And I think the exact opposite. I think the investor has manipulated themselves to have a bunch of equity in homes. They've proven that they didn't spend that money. They've proven that they're a good investor. And I'm happy to make that deal all day, every day. I use that personal strategy in my own portfolio. So I was certainly happy to make that deal. All right, that's it. That's all I got today. I just wanted to go over 3 deals that all the equity worked on and why I said no to 2. And then even though when some people say no to that third, I think it's a great spot to be lending to. Okay, my name is Rich Lennon. Check me out, richlennon.com. We teach real estate investors how to lend money, trying to get 30% returns. And yep, that's it. I'm out. Everybody have a great day.